Hello and welcome to Buildings of Tomorrow, a very special episode of Buildings of Tomorrow. I'm joined today by three experts to talk about artificial intelligence. Not so much the technical aspect, we want to talk about how do we build trust in artificial intelligence and why is it so important for us to realize the real value of this technology in the future. I'm joined today, to the left of me, Marisa Tschopp from
Hi.
Skip, which is a cybersecurity company, but also she's the Swiss ambassador for women in AI. Next to her is Franziska Dolak, an innovation manager at Siemens Smart Infrastructure. And at the end here, we have Ulli Waltinger, who comes to us from Munich. He is the technology manager at the AI labs at Siemens. So thank you all very much for joining us.
Thanks.
Artificial intelligence. This is a huge topic. This is something that we hear a lot about. This has many different meanings and applications. Let's start at the very beginning. If you could all give me just a very quick insight into what you define artificial intelligence as.
Mm-hmm. Well, usually I kind of quote the researchers like Russell and Norvig or so when I define AI, but I really recently I liked Professor Floridi's definition. He said that we can't really define AI, but you will know it's AI when you see it. So I thought that was kind of fun.
I like it. Beautiful.
That's a nice one.
Franziska?
For me, it's really about how AI makes devices smarter and creates value for people. That's kind of how I would phrase it in a very simple manner.
Beautiful.
Mimic human cognition process. That's maybe the official term. I like maybe if I go with the Joshua, which says like intelligence is about making models. Models explain some kind of dynamics. Mm-hmm. The smartness of intelligence comes so we make it goal directed. Do something, move something, recognize something. And since we always see the human as a reference plane for AI or for at least for intelligence, we make it goal-directed computation models of human cognitive processes.
Okay, beautiful. I like that. All three very different definitions, but I think all together they build this story and also highlight to us why there's so many different things we have to talk about. Marisa, let's start with you. You spend a lot of time researching artificial intelligence or AI and focusing around the trust aspect of this. Can you give us an insight into that approach?
Yes. So originally, when we started out, it was we were actually thinking about chatbots and digital assistants, as this is kind of the thing that people are most used to or exponed in their everyday lives. And we thought, okay, so how can we make people use it? How can we? And we thought, okay, but somehow people don't trust them and are somehow skeptical about it. Mm-hmm. And the first thing we did is like we created an intelligence test for digital assistants to show them how smart they are or how good they are or what they can do. And but still, we found that it does not help. Still, the market is not there and people are still very skeptical about it. So we were actually quite too fast, and this happens a lot. So we really stepped back and asked ourselves, okay, we have to go back and really think about the concept of trust from the very basic beginning. What does trust mean? What definitions are there? And what does it mean in the context of usage? How do we need trust in order to use AI and use it to its full potential?
Yeah, and you stepped on you introduced a really important point there. For some people, artificial intelligence or AI is this future thing. You know, like people have watched movies or they assume that one day in the year 2080 we will have something, but we use this every day in many cases, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in our phones, in our Netflix and YouTube, all kinds of areas for sure, yeah.
Beautiful. And Franziska, when we talk about trust, as Marisa was just bringing in, why is this so important for people in a day-to-day aspect?
I think it's very, very important that people, and I recognize it within myself, you don't want to feel like a slave towards technology. It's not like I want to feed me, I want to create value out of it. And I think trust is basically the basis for any type of interaction that you're entering. So for me, it's really the foundation of everything that you can then potentially build on and drive forward in order to create value for all sides in an ecosystem. So I think for me, it's really the one thing that you cannot go without.
Absolutely.
And I have a question to that as well. We have a society already that has built trust with technology to a certain extent. Will this help when it comes to AI? And an open question for any of you.
You mean in terms of that we
About
already
reaching this
use.
trust, we've already developed a strong relationship with technology. We use it every day. Our smartphones, our computers, even in our car now are advancing, leaps and bounds every day. Do you think this will, say, grease the wheels or make it easier for us to find trust in a technology based on AI?
I think it's based on the interaction that we have with smart applications. We live in a data-driven society where algorithms put quite an emphasis in that. And sometimes if we interact with smart search machines, retrieval engines, audio recommendations, or traffics, we have the feeling sometimes, oh, that understands me. Oh, that maybe knows me better than I thought.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, how scary is that? So being that transparent and that active and interacting and knowing about, okay, however these systems work, they gain something from my personal level, my profiles, what I love, what I dislike maybe, or what I would like to have, or which position I want to have. And this demands then some blurriness and leaps where we think like, do we trust this vendor actually? Do I want to have that of a technical system that close to me? It's a frightening at same level. And that's with the acceleration of the algorithms in our world playing that dominant role, that demands quite some challenges, maybe not as impactful as for youth, but for the elderly.
Yeah,
but I feel also for me, it really depends a lot on convenience, right? Sometimes I feel like convenience is exactly the barrier that makes me use something or not. And sometimes even there, I tend to neglect the basis of trust, just because, this is something just easy for me to adopt and just, take on and use. And if it creates value for me in my everyday, well, then perfect.
then okay.
So I think that's a big question, because for me, there's really no general answer to that. I also feel in some aspects I'm like really slow. I'm really kind of a late adopter where I find it super difficult to jump on new things, especially if I feel like, I have to first learn how does it work. And
yeah, I mean, I think from a psychological perspective, the mechanisms of dealing with change are basically the same. So no matter if it's technology, if it's the introduction of e-commerce or whatever it was. However, but the thing is, we don't have a lot of empirical data right now in the context of AI for how do we actually cope with that. But so some suggest it's because of the pace of development, that it's happening so fast that it's much harder to adapt to these changes or trying to react on it. Some say the impact of AI is so huge that we don't know how to cope with that, and that's a difference to e-commerce or whatever it was. However, it's always kind of looking in the how do you say
snowball.
The snowball, like
The snowball effect.
how well are we humans at predicting?
Yeah.
We're trying to predict all these big changes, but our level of prediction, we have made some really big errors, right? And so we don't know. And I think this and all these black box problems, they produce a lot of uncertainty. And trust, basically, as you said, yes, it's that social glue that helps us to interact with each other. But the main reason why we need trust is that we have to cope with uncertainty, and this is why we need trust.
Especially because we are in a machine learning scenario. We're translating input into actions in the real world, right? And we know that these systems have cost and benefits, and we know they have failure modes. We can measure that: accuracy, false positive rates, true positive rates, true negative rates. So we can assess that, and we know that 100% in our world of fuzziness is not
a real thing.
Sometimes not doable, not capable. And so does these kinds of consequences then resonates our value systems, our emotions, our opinions, right? And that's the challenge when then coping, so like how trustfulness is a system where we know it has failure modes.
And I really like the point that you made there, and it's a topic that I've heard you speak about before, Marisa, as well, is when we are confronted with this decision, when we recognize that we're using a technology that has this ability, we either like it or we don't. But it's impossible, or it's difficult for us to really make that decision if we don't know what our values are ourselves. And I think I've heard you ask that question. If you walked up to someone and asked them what are their values, this is a difficult question to answer. How difficult does that make us when we look from the technological point of view? What we're able to achieve, how can we understand or think about the future? How can we improve our chance to understand how we'll react at that point in time?
I think it's a tough question. Can you repeat can you repeat that? Or can be a little bit more concrete?
Definitely.
I really have to think about that a little.
Definitely. So when we're talking about trust, we're talking about us believing that a certain technology with its capabilities fits within our realm of acceptance. We think that yes, this still sits within my band of what I consider reasonable. It fits with my values. What it's trying to achieve is a positive, and the value that Franziska talked about is good enough for me to accept this technology as part of my day-to-day life. Everyone has different values, whether it's, this comes from their own personal views, whether it comes from a culture or a religion or a race. How can we, as an industry, absorb this difference? Or is this something that we just have to work on together?
Yeah, I think you kind of answered it. I think what we are aiming at is some sort of bottom-up approach, some participative approach where we all have to think about, what are we going to do? Why are we doing this? What is the reason for it? How does it impact us? And how do we want to approach this along the line? How do we check for, is everything going right in the end? I think that would be the idealistic one. This is the idealist speaking. But on the other hand, we also have to be really realistic that, AI is market-driven. It comes from the big tech mainly, and in the end, it's about money, right? And I don't think we have. I really fear that we're talking about all these good and ethics and values and all these things, which are great and super important. But sometimes I feel like, okay, also it's like a nice to have thing, right? Yep. In the end, it's if you think AI is not about prestige, popularity, money, I think then you're an idealist, right? So, and I think this is something we have to accept. Just because you want to make money, you're not bad. So we kind of have to integrate that. But then, especially with the big tech, there are problems coming up in regards of democracy, et cetera, that are really affecting us in big time. And this is something we cannot just leave up to big tech. Yeah.
And as you mentioned, we see things every day which are probably a highlight of some of the larger implications that are possible. Franziska, how do we keep a positive spin on this conversation as far as when we think about AI and we've watched the movies, we have this fear, we see something like a big tech having maybe an undue influence on something which we see as important to our society to keep it neutral and to keep it from the people. How do we stay positive in this process as AI continues to neutral?
That's a big question.
And positive is very different than neutral.
Let's start with neutral.
Let's start with neutral. I think.
Let's go for neutral first.
I think probably especially this aspect where you say what we're also reading in the media, right, where there's potentially also a lot of negativity around this topic. I think that's exactly the discourse that we need to have, right? I think the discourse is really the way to come to, let's say, an informed decision and a certain knowledge around the topic that then also gives me the freedom to decide, right, where do I want to position myself in this whole sphere and how far am I going to also in myself, in my own interactions, really adopt. And I think it is very, very important to really have open dialogue and discourse, number one. And I think number two, I think it's probably also about experience. I feel like probably everything there is this amount of experience, and if you have good experiences and you feel something is creating value for you, with that comes at least a certain neutrality or potentially even positivity. But I think especially the critical discourse is so important because, and you mentioned it, right, there's a lot of agendas playing in that field, maybe from politics, money, whatever it is. So I think it's very, very important that we are critical and really making sure are we still here in the realm of what we would call responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Great AI needs great responsibility, and it's very important to really discuss about the ethical implications. And I think that's where you need to have really the discourse, but also provide space for people to also shape it and co-create it potentially into something. I put it in front of you, like eat or die, this kind of situation, but rather have something where it evolves and where we as a society, as people, can really take part in that.
Yeah.
And Ulli, you and your team, you're working on this challenge from a certain perspective. You're working hard on trying to create guidelines to help a company like Siemens to tackle this today and into the future. Why is this important, and how do you take this first step? How do you go about the process?
So I think in the first place, to catch up on the latter question, differentiate between consumer, B2C market, and the B2B market, where Siemens maybe is more into the latter.
Definitely.
The B2C market is towards attention and predictable behavior, which sometimes we also say predictable behavior is some kind of intelligence that we have. But basically, if you drill it down, they draw down your attention time. You have roughly for 40 seconds, what's your attention span for a certain moment. They're trying to optimize your attention span, these 30 seconds, to the best of their knowledge, sometimes clickbaiting, sometimes ads, or making some value, maybe money, right, out of that or the advertising. In the B2B market, from a historic perspective, was always about optimizing, gaining efficiency, productivity out. And I think these are the capabilities also, which we as Siemens see. Like, we have this one-trick pony technologies such as machine learning. They are sometimes marvelous good in certain very narrowed down tasks. How can we use these in what kind of cases and what kind of scenarios? But we should be aware of that where capabilities are there are also some risks. And what we do with a team, a mixture, interdisciplinary team from sustainability office, from technology innovation, from governance affair, from technology geeks as well, right? Bringing together and shaping, okay, what are the best practices? What is the context about the capabilities, about the risks, and about the mitigations scenarios? So we can propose and support the contextualization. And we do that on 3 levels, like rules and governance, means what kind of principles do we want to align? Second, about technology. How do we design technology that supports the trustworthiness, the safeness, the explainable aspects? And the third pillar is about how do we engage, how we engage together on technologies such as machine learning and AI. What is this? How does it work? How does it impact you? How about the impact on the products? And the last pillar maybe, are we using it for the right problems? And I think this is something where Siemens should be a thought leader in saying, are not the sustainable aspects, these aspects where we can make a difference as an infrastructure provider, right? And this is what we, in a broader community, trying to establish and to motivate and try and invite everybody to join, right? To shape this discourse.
Does it make it much easier when you have a clear goal in mind? When we talk about technology development, you need to have a problem to fix. You need to have a really clear understanding of what your outcome should be to work towards. Does it make it easier to have these discussions when you have, let's say, a more focused scope?
Yes, we defined 7 capability clusters. And we have now a good guess that this different categories, profiling, process automation, autonomous control, optimization, visual monitoring, and those kinds of aspects cover quite some cases, maybe all cases that we see in Siemens at least. And having this categorization saying, okay, what kind of capabilities we can associate best practices to do though. And then it doesn't matter whether it's a building technology colleague use case, or whether it's an optimization of grids, or whether it's, sensing harsh environments in mobility.
You have the same set of guidelines, you have the same decision process that you go through to decide, is this the right technology,
Yes.
and is this the right application of that?
And are we convinced that there's a responsible use of this technology in this case?
Yeah.
And how is the other guys doing that? How do we prevent maybe some kind of aspects where we say like, okay, that's not where we want to stand for?
Yeah.
May I add,
Of
just
course,
maybe
yeah.
depending on who's listening, I think, first of all, Ulli said some tremendously important things, and and the principle that guides their work. But just to kind of give how do you say, to put that in relation. So, for example, Ulli mentioned explainability or trustworthiness, and just for example, my friend at IBM, she's been working on explainability for 5 years full time, and there's basically no answer to this.
Yeah.
I've been working on simply the psychological aspects of trust for 2 years now, and I'm still nowhere. So these three principles, they are huge. There are thousands of people working on explainability. So just to put that a little bit in context, how much work is needed to be done, and first of all, how great that is to try to integrate all these, but really thinking about how much work this actually is.
And how we're still, even though we have spent so many years and we have so many talented people working on this across different industries and with different backgrounds, we still have a long way to go on this journey.
Yes, and as we said, it needs this interdisciplinarity. It needs people coming together. It needs a different mindset to really come out with the best possible solution with the lowest error rate possible.
Yeah. I love interacting in the lab where we somehow test very early prototypes or very early hypotheses to work with young geeks, actually, because they are not afraid of critical thinking.
Yeah.
And this kind of mindset of critical thinking, and coming from a different realm, maybe not from an industry perspective, not kind of, what kind of view you are, or what kind of, that's not my turf, that's not my problem thing. These critical thinking is the young generation enormously valuable. And it shows that, we need to get a lot of interdisciplinary folks in that, right? From diversity from all levels. I mean, from disciplines, from genders, from countries, from language, from all kinds of us, because it contributes towards the notion, how do we want to, design the new places of tomorrow?
Sorry, please.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Critical thinking is probably the most important skill of our time and education. So I also want to add to this that we also often think that trust means we have to trust this thing fully and just go with it. And that the opposite of trust is skepticism. But that's actually wrong. So trust and skepticism or critical thinking, they're actually dance partners. So you have to use them together to find that appropriate level of trust. We don't want to overtrust things. We don't want to distrust. So we have to find that really good calibrated level of trust to make the best use out of it.
And this will be different for every person, right? Someone will be happy to receive an answer from a chatbot, but they would not want a self-driving car, as an example. So we have to find those levels of interaction and go from there. That critical thinking, does it become more and more important because we're talking about a technology that has almost an unlimited breadth of application?
Yes, and certainly because hidden agenda, and I think mostly there's a lot of, you have to make sure that this is not only market driven, and it's really hard to keep in mind that, the whole social good and thing. I think this problem with the hidden agenda you mentioned, that's always, or the agenda mustn't be hidden. But we all come with perspectives, right? Ulli wants, he has his AI lab and they're doing great things. And obviously he wants to promote this. I'm coming from a corporate, I'm coming from Women AI, I want to promote women. Others want to get funding for their research. Whatever it is, we all have some agenda in our minds. And I think this is nothing bad. It's just the way it is. We have to accept that.
Accept that when you develop
understand
technology,
how this affects our opinions and what we say and what information we take in, and this is human. This is just how we are.
And with this technology, it has more opportunity for those biases to actually be brought into that technology, into the application.
And I think it's a lot more at eye level with us than maybe other technologies so far, right? I think we also before talked about this aspect of AI being more of a companion, right? Is it really still just a technology, or is it transcendent in some way? I think that we're probably also talking on a whole other level, I feel, compared to other aspects.
Yeah.
We're coming to the end. We're almost out of time. And before we ask for one quick comment from everybody, I just thought that we'd touch on one more topic. And we've touched it at different points, but why is it different for AI? What is the additional challenge that AI brings for all of these discussions that we haven't had to tackle in the past? I'll start with you, Ulli.
Yeah. Nice.
You'll be happy with that, right?
So in the current hype momentum of artificial intelligence, we mostly mix aspects from digitalization, so digitize processes, digitize flows, automation, whether it's physical movement, robotics, or process automation, and spawned across the globalization, also a big word, I know, right? But it means like we shuffle the value systems, supply chain systems, and solutions on a broader scale, where the input level, the entry level, is in a digitalized world much more easier. Back in the days, it was hard to roll out a system if you're on the hardware driven and you want to cooperate with China, or you want to collaborate with US or somewhere in Europe, right? Now with the digital world, it makes it much more easier to expose and provide in certain capabilities, and on a single 3-month venture, startup, or large-scale corporate. And it's triggered by, it's not again about this scale, but about the speed. So it doesn't matter how big you are as a corporate, it's all that matters how fast you are. And that makes the difference. And this has an impact on then the tremendous scope of what perception of AI is. Sometimes I hear C-level saying, yeah, we have this awesome AI case, which is like digitalization of the travel reimbursement. All right, that's some more the digitalization aspects. And sometimes it's how you provide these capabilities of assessing your risk to your company, right? So we have a broad flavor of capabilities of one-trick ponies, which are exposed at a radical scalability. And that brings mixed feelings in there, but also that brings this impactness, because we know you can scale as a single person, have a huge impact on the global economy.
Okay, beautiful. Franziska, same question. Why is AI different from what we've tackled before?
I feel like it's often, if you really look at it from a user's perspective, it's a lot less predictable. And I think it has some sort of black box effect that I don't know what's happening in the background and why am I now getting this recommendation, or I think it's probably uncertainty, but also maybe an aspect of fear. I don't know, right? Of something outsmarting me, of something that's taking over control. That's my feeling on a very human level of why I think it's so different and also gets so much attention.
Yeah.
Marisa?
For me, I think, as we already said, AI has this great impact, and AI has a lot of power, etc. What concerns me is AI is mostly driven or situated within the big tech companies, Google, Alibaba, Amazon, etc. And so this big power is located within a very, very few people. So, and history has shown that a lot of power only distributed to 1 or 2 people has never gone very well. So I think this is one of my greatest concerns.
Okay, perfect. So as a last word, thank you all for joining. If I could get from you a comment, what is on the line here? When we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about responsibility and trust and developing both of these hand in hand. What are we risking if we're not successful? Marisa, we'll start with you.
A lot.
Okay, perfect. Franziska.
I mean, a lot. I mean, don't you agree? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but AI has the potential to optimize or a lot of things. Whether I don't know if any thing is not affected by AI. So I think it's making things a lot better. I don't know if there's a superlative. It's more like it's making better this, it's optimizing that, da 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 da. But and we're risking a lot if we don't invest in this, and if we don't invest in that responsibly and critically.
Yeah, perfect. Franziska?
So I think 2 sides. One is kind of really the technology piece taking over compared to really having humanized experience and interaction, and that for me comes a lot back to balance and fairness, which for example is one of my greatest values. I feel of fairness. And really making sure we're creating something that's still of value for people, rather than that's taking on its own life.
So not one directional, not just
Yes.
creating value
Has
for
to be
the
give and
controllers of
take,
the
yeah,
technology, but also delivering the value to all of us to justify that.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Ulli?
I would go for, we're living in a world of exponentially complexity. And as the complexity arises, we need tools that help us tackling humongous, responsibilities and humongous challenges. I think tools such as machine learning can help to facilitate to answering a couple of these questions. I'm looking forward for healthcare. I'm looking forward for energy distribution. I'm looking for smartness, maybe also in pervasive rooms. But I'm looking for, that we use as a Siemens that for the sustainability. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Marisa,
Well said.
thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ulli, Franziska.
Thanks very much.
And thank you all for joining us here on Buildings of Tomorrow. Please feel free to like, comment, or share this episode, and also ensure to subscribe to us here on this channel. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.